Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Today is July 22nd, 2020, um, and welcome to the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion's Anti-Racism online session. Today is our last session, and I will be giving the closing remarks for our Anti-Racism Conference. Before I start, as I've always done during these sessions, I know that most folks start with a land acknowledgement, and while a land acknowledgement is one of the interventions to get Canadians thinking about their role in the state's treatment of Indigenous peoples, Indigenous communities, and Indigenous nations. It's also the land acknowledgement has become a performative uh, statement where it's done and everybody moves on to what they're doing without any follow-up action. So for us during this conference, every session we've shared with you the great work that the Yellowhead Institute has been doing, and I would invite everyone to uh, uh, check out the work they're doing in terms of uh, letting putting out research that relates to governance around Indigenous peoples, communities, and nations, and also the treatment of the Canadian state towards Indigenous peoples, nations, and communities. So, for those of you that are listening, uh, I would say that's uh, that's something that you can do. And then for those that are in Hamilton, do know that our city council ratified an urban indigenous strategy. And in that strategy, they have, I believe, over 30 recommendations that the city should undertake. So if you're a resident of Hamilton, um, contact your city councilor and the mayor and ask for not just the strategy, but also uh, financial resources to ensure that those recommendations, those recommendations are action is taken on them. And the last thing I'll say is, there's still many indigenous communities that are still under water advisories. So that is something that also needs to be brought. Uh, uh, we need attention on that issue, whether it's to your member of parliament and also folks in the media to talk about these issues. So that is what I'll say, and that is what I will share with you. So for today's session, I'm going to be giving basically closing remarks uh, of of uh, of all the sessions that we've done thus far. Um, and yes, and then after that, for those that have tuned in and that may want to ask specific questions, we'll be here, or I'll be here to answer those questions. Um, before I start with my closing remarks, I also uh, want to extend my greatest gratitude and appreciation for the ASL interpreters, Annette and Vanessa. They have been with us since we started, and I think when we're talking about providing uh, uh, information to everyone without creating barriers, ensuring that uh, accessibility is available for everyone is something that we should all work towards. I know that we are trying and we are learning. I know Vanessa and Annette have given me instructions about labels on our video screens here, and it's being a detriment to participation from folks. So I really want to say thank you for their participation. Thank you for uh, uh, joining us and also giving me an opportunity to learn from them. And so for those that are always going to be doing activities, please ensure that there's a budget line for ASL and other electronic needs and accessibility needs, just to ensure that everyone can participate. So please join me in saying a big thank you to Vanessa and Annette. Um, so uh, my closing remarks begin with Canada releasing an anti-racism strategy plan for 2019 to 2022. The anti-racism strategy was released in 2019. That work uh, revolved around members of parliament and the Canadian Heritage Department going around the country to talk to uh, various organizations like HCCI and other racialized leaders across this country to talk to them about uh, uh, the experiences around racism and what the government could and should do to address these issues of racism. So I remember there was a session that was done here in Hamilton uh, um, that was facilitated by uh, Honorable MP Philomena Tassi, and that was attended by various members of the Black community and other racialized communities. And in that session, we talked about challenges in our educational sector, challenges in the justice sector, challenges in the police sector. There was numerous discussions that came up, and so based on those facilitating sessions, the government released this anti-racism strategy that looked to make a 45 million investment that was supposed to take immediate steps in combating racism, discrimination, based on what they heard during the engagement process. And so this was announced under the leadership of Honorable Pablo Rodriguez, who at the time was the Minister of Canadian Heritage and Multiculturalism. So some of the guiding principles from uh, uh, the, the the briefing or the announcement was, demonstrating federal leadership, empowering communities, and building awareness and changing attitudes. So when this announcement was made, HCCI uh, uh, was interested, obviously, um, in looking at a number of projects that could look at talking about racism in Hamilton and in Ontario in a broader sense. So we joined forces with OCASI, the Ontario Coalition of Agencies Serving Immigrants, and at the time the town of Ajax, to discuss what a conference would look like in terms of bringing various folks across our province and hopefully across our country that were doing anti-racism work in terms of anti-racism organizers, organizations, researchers, educators, activists, and what have you, to come together. Let's talk about these issues and also share some of the work that everyone was engaging in. So we did put in the application, and we did get the the grant. In terms of Hamilton, prior to the to us um, sending in an application, the Statistics Canada released a report stating that Hamilton had the highest number of hate crimes per capita in Canada, and uh, many people were aghast at that statistic. But for us at HCCI, we had been sounding the alarm for years. Actually, the, the the reason why HCCI started was because of a hate crime. In 2001, an individual burns down a Hindu Samaj temple thinking that it was a mosque, right? So our organization, HCCI, has been trying to address these issues around racism, hate, discrimination, and what have you. And prior to the 2019 release, Hamilton was always in the top five, right? So for us, we said, hey, look, we need to start addressing this issue, and eventually we made it up to number one. Um, when that was when the news broke, I think there was some hesitation from our elected officials about the severity of 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 being designated or being or having uh, uh, the number one hate crimes per capita in the country. And to be frank, they were disillusioned. They kept, the response was always, you know, uh, by and large, most people in Hamilton uh, don't engage in racist and discriminatory behavior. And we've seen these responses before, and they weren't taking it seriously. So we had that one issue, right, where hate crimes was prevalent, has been prevalent, and secondly, um, uh, the good news, at least, was that in Hamilton, in 2018, we had come to an agreement between the HCCI, the City of Hamilton, and McMaster to establish a Hamilton Anti-Racism Resource Center. And so the resource center was supposed to deal with some of these issues. And so that was the at least the good news to address some of these issues. On the other hand, at that 2019, we were also seeing yellow vests congregate right in front of City Hall and engaging in xenophobic rhetoric. So many community leaders, not just HCCI, approached council and said, "Hey, look, we do understand that everybody has the right to protest, but when someone is protesting on city grounds and they're engaging in xenophobic, racist, Islamophobic comments, it is their prerogative um, to end that behavior." And to be frank, most of them didn't take that calling serious. Um, And so this bubbled up, for quite a number of months. And as some of you may know or may not know, at Hamilton Pride in 2019, there were a group of yellow vesters and other alt-right groups and religious groups that went to Pride Hamilton and agitated uh, the event. And the process of doing that, the Hamilton police were called to address some of the violent behavior that was going on there. And uh, to the amazement and to the surprise of many, the Hamilton police did not do anything. Um, and there was so much pain and so much disgust and so much disappointment from the community that the police didn't do anything. And when everything, when the event was done, our mayor, um, who wasn't there, sided on the yes, our mayor sided on the police accounting of events. And when the police were also questioned, their reason for not acting was because Hamilton Pride organizers did not invite them to have a booth. And this was very egregious to the community. And this is exactly the kind of behavior and the kind of language that that many racialized and marginalized folks see and witness when we're talking about racism, discrimination, and other forms of oppression. So Hamilton was really angered. So I say this to give you the context of what was happening in Hamilton, for you to get a sense of how dire addressing racism and hate and discrimination was for our organization and for many residents here in Hamilton. So while all of this was going on, we were hoping that yes, we would get this grant from Canadian Heritage so that we could engage in some of these discussions. I would like to say that fast forward to June 2020, there was an independent investigation that was done to look into the behavior of the police at Pride, and the report basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the Hamilton police didn't adequately prepare to ensure the safety of those that were in attendance at Pride, at Hamilton Pride 2019. So that gives you a sense of the seriousness that Hamilton was dealing with. So we had every inclination to have this conference at the end of March. We picked March because March is the month where we also celebrate the elimination of racial discrimination. So that was the reason for picking March. And so we had scheduled our the conference for March 28th and the 29th. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and so we had to reconfigure our plans. We decided to move ahead with our sessions because we felt it was important to have this discussion and find ways to engage with Hamilton and the broader province and the broader country. And so we before that, let me say that we did have our 2-day conference was packed. We had over 80 submissions, and we had slotted in about 85 workshops, panelists, show and tells, and what have you for the 2 days. So we were really looking forward to the conference and to hear what all the participants had to say. Nonetheless, we decided to move on, and our first session was with Desmond Cole and MPP Laura May Lindo, and they talked about discrimination during COVID. And at that time, we were having a discussion around how COVID disproportionately, the burden disproportionately affects racialized communities and Black communities, Indigenous communities. And our province wasn't even keeping track of race-based data and other socio-economic data around who was being affected, who was being infected, affected, and who unfortunately passed away. And it was around this time the chief medical officer of our province said there was no need to collect any race-based data. But nonetheless, the province decided to start collecting race-based data. Here in Hamilton, HCCI and other medical professionals and researchers reached out to public health to ask them when they would start collecting that data. So we are still in conversations with them. But I think at that time where Desmond and Laura May Lindo spoke about these things, it really showed that when we're talking about racism in this country, it invades and applies in all aspects of how people live, right? Whether it's in the healthcare system, whether it's educational, whether it's criminal justice, racism permeates every aspect of Canadian society and culture. Our next session was facilitated by two speakers, Huda Hassan and Lynn Lee, and they spoke about the importance of racial solidarity during COVID and after COVID. And I think their conversation at that time was in relation to, the rise in racism towards folks that were perceived to be Asian, Southeast Asian, and so they were talking about, what are the synergies and what are the experiences that racialized people face when we're talking about racism in the Canadian context. And if you fast forward now to some of the discussions that are taking place in terms of, defunding the police, asking our governments to address systemic racism. Now we can see the importance of that discussion in terms of racial solidarity. So we thank Huda and Lynn for leading that discussion. We followed up with a session that focused on racism in the media, and our facilitators were Prasanth Matara and Nam Kiwanuka. And I think when we're talking about the media, most folks would claim to perceive that the media is supposed to be objective. Nonetheless, they also engage in perpetuating some ideas of racism and other stereotypes. So that conversation focused on the outward looking of how media portray racialized folks, and also looked at the internal deficiencies of the media industry in terms of hiring, and also engaging in discussions around issues that are pertinent to racialized folks. So that was a very interesting discussion. Then we showed a short documentary that was produced by the Canadian Race Relations Foundation that highlighted a story of Rodney Smalls in Halifax, and how there's a pipeline of Black youth into our court system and into our jail system, and the interactions with Black youth, Indigenous youth, with police always lead to some form of penal conclusion that lead them into jails and prisons. So I believe around that time was the murder of Mr. George Floyd. And so Canadians were asking themselves, how does police brutality look like? And even in Canada, we were dealing with the murder of Regis, the murder of Aisha, DeAndre Campbell. And so now Canadians and residents of Hamilton were starting to ask, what does police brutality look like in Canada? We also saw videos of the RCMP engaging in some egregious, violent acts. And we had to talk about, the founding of the RCMP, which was to push Indigenous nations, communities, and peoples into reserves. So that was a time that we were reckoning with all of these issues around racism, particularly as it pertains to the Canadian context. We also invited Dr. Emil Joseph, a professor from the School of Social Work here at McMaster, to talk about defying racism, obviously within the context of Hamilton. And so he talked about the forms of gaslighting that happens when you are engaging in anti-racism work, especially when you are dealing with white folks that are charged to oversee anti-racism work, and also elected officials. So that was a very enlightening conversation so that folks get an understanding of, you know, why anti-racism work is one, is so important, and two, needs to be directed and led by people that have lived experience, and people that know how to build coalitions among racialized folk, and also have a historical analysis of how these things impact our daily way of engaging with people, and in different places. Our last, well, this is our last session, but our last session where we invited someone, we had Yodagali Jonathan, an Indigenous medical student, talk about, um, how racism occurs and how racism looks like within the healthcare system when someone identifies as being Indigenous, from going to school as a medical student, and also the experiences of patients um, when they are accessing the Canadian healthcare system. So those were the discussions that were had. And for those of you that missed any of those discussions, you can find them on our YouTube page, and you can also find them on our Facebook page. So our YouTube page is HCCI Hamilton, and our Facebook is HCCI, or you can just type Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, and we will show up. So, in summary, I would just like to say that, as we speak, we've been through a roller coaster of different movements. Only in this year, it would feel like a lifetime, but it's just been this year. So in March, we had COVID, and during the time that we were shut down, we really began to see the effects of capitalism, and 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 the inadequate response from all levels of government. And then even within that, we also saw how our governments have done a poor job of addressing systemic racism. And now we're in a moment where um, residents across this country are asking for full accountability from police departments and from the RCMP. So, how do those connect to broader anti-racism work? Um, as I said earlier, if you look at the RCMP, you could argue that uh, their job engage means they have to do racist things. If you look at the history of police, um, their job entails that they have to do racist things. Um, so it's important for us to ask ourselves, what do we do with institutions that engage in racist behavior and perpetrate racist behavior? It was only last week we saw um, the Black Lives Matter Toronto uh, movement uh, engage in a peaceful artistic project to draw attention to um, Ryerson's goals, historical engagement in the creation of um, residential schools. Um, and so the question remains, Why do we have monuments of individuals that engaged in cultural genocide? And if not to take down these monuments, then why do they still stand? And so that's the question. Because if we're not going to do that, and if we're not going to have actual anti-racism conversations, then we're going to be engaging in performative actions. I would like to recall or draw people's attention, because lots has happened since March. There was a Black Lives Matter rally in Ottawa, and the Prime Minister showed up and took a knee. There was also a march in Toronto, and the Chief of Police, Chief Sanders, also took a knee. And since they took a knee, no formal action has taken place to address racism. If we take the case of Toronto police, there were many Torontonians and residents of Toronto that came out and asked their council to look at a 10% budget cut to a budget that is 1 billion. So even if you did 10% of 1 billion, you still have enough. And Toronto Council refused to take a 10% cut. Instead, they decided to give the police cameras. And I remind people, when Mr. George Floyd was murdered, the 3 police officers were wearing cameras, and that didn't save him. So now many people that have been engaged in anti-racism work are asking for actions. They are asking for actions. If you ask many indigenous peoples, nations, and communities what to do with the RCMP, they will tell you that it should be disbanded. So I say this to let everyone know that now is the time for action. Now is the time for action. We look at our schools. If you take McMaster is now doing a review, looking at how Black athletes are treated within their athletic department. And yet, there were people that were saying, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they were saying that racism exists at McMaster, and yet their leaders never did anything. So, action is what people are asking for. What role does government play? They need to start listening to residents. What role does policy play? We need to start looking at how race plays in how we deliver services. What role does education play? We need to look at our curriculums, what we teach in our high schools, in our universities. And the last thing that I'll say, because I'm at almost 40 minutes, the last thing I'll say is in Hamilton. In Hamilton, there are a group of local organizers that are asking our mayor and our council and our Hamilton Police Service Board to look into a 20% cut in the Hamilton police budget. In Hamilton, the Hamilton police budget is 171. I'll say that again, 171. With a 20% cut, which equates to 35 million, right? They still have enough. These requests are not arbitrary. These requests are so that we can better serve our community. Every municipality is dealing with a COVID deficit, right? Our municipalities are asking the province for money, are asking the feds for money. They could start by reducing their police budgets. Their police budgets uh, that see people die, literally die at the hands of interacting with police. And for those that will say this is an overstretch, look, in Hamilton, Chevrana Abdi died at the hands of police. A black trans woman died at the hands of police. Um, Ricky Jeremiah was brutally beaten at the hands of Hamilton police. Steve Messick shot 8 times at the hands of police. So we're not speaking in conjecture, we're speaking in reality. So our closing remarks here are to tackle these issues of racism, we need systemic change and we need action now. Um, there's nothing else to say. And if that action is not taken up, I know that there are many organizers across this country that are going to organize and that are going to ensure that our future is one that is anti-racist. Our future is one that is abolitionist. Our future is one that refuses any form of oppression. So that is the message that I leave with you. And all our sessions have kind of touched upon these things. And I'm just fusing them and saying we need change now. And so everyone should listen, political leaders, and for the broader society that are asking, what can I do? Get engaged in your local community, see who's doing anti-racism work, connect with Indigenous organizations, Indigenous folks that are doing work, connect with climate change organizers that are now building broad coalitions to address these issues. So that is the closing remark. And if you want to learn more, you can always reach out to us at info@hcci.ca. We're also always looking for donations to continue with our work. So if you'd like to donate, you can engage in a one-time donation, or you can sign up to be a monthly donor. And if you also want to volunteer, you can reach out to us, and we can connect you with lots of organizing that's happening around Hamilton and in Ontario. My last word would be thank you to the Canadian Heritage for providing us with this grant. I would like to thank OCASI, Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. I'd like to thank the YWCA, Rabble Media, Sasha Sexual Assault Center, Hamilton and area, the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, and would like to thank some of our student volunteers that started working on this in partway through 2019. Rohit Prasad, Tatsin Hussein, and would like to thank our anti-racism officer, Mohammed, and also take this opportunity to thank all our HCCI staff that contributed, Sarah Jama, Rose Sennett, Samson DeCamo, and to our advisory board that looked through all the proposals. We'd also like to say thank you. And our hope is that we'll continue to have this conference. Definitely not next year, because next year is just around the corner. But we'll take 2021 to kind of look for money, and hopefully we'll be able to have the conference in 2022. So thank you all to everyone that participated, and we look forward to working with you, seeing you soon. Yes, that's it. Uh, we don't have any questions, so we'll just end it that way. And again, much appreciation and love and thanks to Annette and Vanessa. Um, and who knows, maybe in 2022, Annette and Vanessa might make their way down to Hamilton. Yeah. So thank you very much. Oh, we got a message from I Heart Hamilton. Hey, big shout outs to I Heart Hamilton tour. Um, they've been doing some great work in terms of letting people know that you know folks can tour their own city and find new places. So if you haven't heard of I Heart Hamilton tour, please check them out. You can find them on Facebook, on Twitter. They also have a radio show on CFMU on Fridays, so you can check them out. I believe from 2 to 3. So thank you. I had Hamilton tour for checking in and also making Hamilton a place that people can say they're proud to be residents here. We have another message. Right when I was about to sign off, we have messages. We have another message from Tomoko. Thank you. We didn't get to do this in person, but you all did an incredible job putting these sessions online. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, we knew we had to do something, so we tried our best, and I'm glad that people were able to tune in. And now these sessions are also online, YouTube, Facebook, recorded, so people can always go back and watch these sessions and kind of engage in some of the topics uh, that uh, that we were talking about. So thank you very much for tuning in. And yes, so now we have more messages. Okay, we have a message from yes, Sasha, Sexual Assault Center, Hamilton and area. Yes, thank you very much. Sasha was one of the sponsors. They provided us with some financial support. So we always thank our sponsors that give us financial support. So yes, thank you, Sasha. And for those of you that don't know about the Sexual Assault Center for Hamilton and area, you please check them out. Check them out. They provide lots of um, resources and support for survivors of sexual violence. So please reach out to them, and they also need some help financially as well. I know in the past they've hosted their chocolate fest, and obviously because of the uncertainty of how things are going, uh, chocolate fest might not or might be done in a different fashion. But in any way, please donate to Sasha so that they can continue with their great work. Well, now lots of messages. We got thanks HCCI from Carmela. Thank you, Carmela. Thanks for tuning in. You also do some great work at McMaster. So we are always trying to uplift everyone and trying to ensure that we're there for each other, building capacity amongst each other. So thank you for your work as well. We got another message from uh, Paloma Santa Rosa. Uh, they say huge thank you to HCCI and Annette and Vanessa. See, Annette and Vanessa now. Hamilton knows Hamilton knows about you, so you definitely have to come down for our conference. And then, oh, okay. So Sasha Hamilton is saying, um, Sasha Hamilton is saying, uh, you can call their support line 905 525 4162. And so that's the support line for survivors and allies. It now has been revealed. Paloma Santa Rosa is Vilma Rossi, and a big thank you to Paloma Santa Rosa for all the great work that you are doing as well. Um, there's so many folks that that are out volunteering, that are out doing great work, that are engaged in various things that are happening around our city. So we would like for you to continue that work and know that your work is valued, and we hear and see you and appreciate every one of you. So thank you very much. I think I think that that's it for the messages. So thank you all. Thank you, Annette, Vanessa. Yes, and that's it. Thank you all. Um, hope we'll see you soon. Bye bye and good night.